All right, today, folks, we are going to do some rotoscoping in Photoshop and maybe get into some After Effects later, in addition to playing with this technique called the smudge tool. Rotoscoping requires that you get online, find some sort of URL address of value, and then go to keepvid.com, paste the URL address into the download option, and then click on this area right here, which will essentially allow you to download that content. If it did not work, sometimes this menu bar comes up and bothers us. We can grab it again. And, oh no, we're getting a lag. The other place you can go is clipconverter.cc, and maybe we have better luck right here, hitting the download MP4 option. Let's just see if that helps us.
Also, there's a YouTube converter too that does the same thing, I believe. If this isn't working.
Yeah, see, these are the like kind of bad, not available for videos or music. Okay. Let's try this one more time. So we'll just do this download. Yeah, let's try that. We'll call this parkour. Oh, great. There we are. So we've got our footage. We're going to open up Photoshop here. And the key today is going to be going to this option when we create our new file. Let's do our film and video option here. We'll do HD 720. And we'll hit create, bring up our timeline. And right here is our create video timeline. We're going to transform our layer into a normal layer here, turn off our stuff we don't need, namely libraries. We really just want timeline layers and then maybe some history, so we can go back in time if we need it. So here we are. We're going to be continuing on in that sort of same vein of working with a 12 frames per second, because we're going to be doing frame by frame animation, and that's the equivalent of shooting on twos. So remember to go over here, set timeline frame rate to 12, click OK, and then we're going to go up to video layers, and this time create a new video layer from file. So on my desktop, I find my parkour video, and I click open, and we've got instant footage into Photoshop that we're going to use to trace over the footage. I'm going to hit Command T to stretch this out a little bit to kind of maximize the space, and hit Enter, and you can kind of see that now it's a little bit bigger. If I want to kind of back up a little bit, I can click on my magnifying glass. You can kind of see that you can make use of that space however you like. Important is to find a place or moment that we want to capture, and in this case, let's find something of interest. So I kind of like this little moment here. We'll start right there, but I was just dragging this clip, and we'll name it reference clip. right here. Grab our brush. Let's get some interesting brushes, append to the existing ones. Let's grab our chalk. And I'm not working on a stylus today. That would be really nice just to be able to draw. So if you can check one out, get a Wacom tablet, or even use a Cintiq, that's ideal. We're going to create a new video layer right here to lay on top, and this is kind of where we're going to use our roto. We're going to start drawing our roto content on. So I'm just going to take this brush and very quickly kind of plug through this content, increasing my flow to about 100%. That'll just make things fly out a little bit faster. But we're just going to make sure we're zoomed in all the way and that you're frame by frame manipulating your footage. In this case, I'm not worried so much about really nailing small details. You certainly can on your own time, making reference to some really cool stuff. But for now, we'll just kind of race through. There's only so much detail I can get with the mouse. The great thing about this process is it's not particularly difficult technically. It is time consuming, but it's also a great motion study. I think one of the valuable things for early sort of motion graphics and animation folks is learning to see how the body reacts to weight, reacts to gravity, reacts to forces acting upon it. These are some pretty great poses too. And you know, your goal for your project is to just come up with something that interests you and demonstrate this process in some way. The other kind of interesting thing about the human eye is that we're designed to not only see detail, but to see the way things move. And you can almost get away with complete abstraction. What I mean by that is if I turn this off, we may not be able to register that as a human being at all. Kind of looks a little human, but once we see it move, right, we immediately recognize it as something familiar. And that, I think, is a really interesting phenomenon, this idea of abstraction possessing sort of accurate movement of the human body. So that's, I think, a really kind of cool thing to kind of play around with. I'm just going to do a few more drawings here because hopefully this shows at least technically how this process is carried out. So notice I'm also just not drawing on the reference layer. Sometimes it's good to like lock that so that you don't accidentally disturb it. But what I've got here is a rotoscoped clip. And there's another really cool little feature that I just want to point out in Photoshop, and that's, you know, with this normal layer. I'm going to just actually type in background. And I'm going to kind of put this on top of my normal layer here, but reduce its opacity just a little bit. You'll notice that my background is moving. Does everybody notice that? Well, you could go through and roto that, or you could use some serious corner cutters, which we love to do. And so I'm going to just take this. I'm going to get kind of a different color here. And you can kind of see by holding Shift, I can actually create a nice straight line in Photoshop. It's kind of a nice touch here. Again, I'm operating on another layer here. This is my background. And you know, we can kind of just turn that off. Here's our, you know, here's our background. You know, we can come in and add the kind of detail we want, you know, to this little world here. And turn our opacity back on. Check this out. We've got our we've got our positioning set right here. I'm going to bring it back down just so we can kind of see the animation process. But with any Photoshop layer that exists, you've got this little triangle that you can click on here, and you can essentially set a position keyframe and then move this around, again using our move tool, to different areas. It's not quite as powerful as After Effects, but in a pinch it will do. And you kind of just have to kind of move back and forth here to sort of see if you can get a reasonable manipulation of that background. So I'm just going to click off here and turn our opacity back up. You'll notice there's some clipping here, sort of a white region that's sort of not filled. I can just come in here and fill that in. As this moves over here, also, you know, you can kind of see I can start to fill that in as well, and also right there. And we could kind of just continue our background discussion. You know, maybe this extends off like this. Maybe our character's on a building. Maybe we're in like some really cool city. You know, the great thing about this is, and the purpose of rotoscoping, I think, is to take you to places that you can't go with your footage. You know, so my character here could be up on this building top. Like this. So we've used a normal layer in addition to rotoscoping. We don't have to redraw that over and over. The other really cool thing that I want to show you, or at least review, is this technique called the smudge tool. Let's suppose we want some smoke off in the distance, maybe from some polluting plant. And we're going to go grab a new layer here. And this really isn't much different than our sort of frame-by-frame technique. I'm just going to name it smoke. It's a good idea to just keep all of this stuff organized. Right now it's not going to be moving with really anything at all. I can do that later. But I want to show you the power of duplicating drawings. So let's start off with something. Interesting, and we'll have it sort of, you know, vanish into thin air. Let's say we've got this like eyeball, the eye of truth.
Illuminati?
Yes, something like that. So we've got this nice detailed image. Now, I noticed I drew it on a video layer, and right now it only lasts for one frame. But if I go to Layer, Video Layer, Duplicate Frame, check it out, it duplicates. I can then use this smudge tool, and it's just found right here. I'm going to bump up my brush size a little bit by messing with the bracket key. Check this out. Between the smudge and the actual brush tool, I can again duplicate this use the smudge to bring this down even more. We're using another sort of cool animation technique to close the eyeball. And again, you can always come back in and sort of draw content. Layer, video layers, duplicate frame. Smudge this even down more. The bigger the brush size, the kind of more opaque stuff looks. There's my sort of closed eye. Look at that. And then suppose it disappears off into oblivion for some reason or another. Again, video layers, duplicate frame. We're going to just take this and I'm going to just hit it with my smudge tool. Again, duplicate frame. Let's hit it again. Duplicate frame. Hit it again. Now, I don't know if there are any lazy folks among us, but I'm a terribly lazy person. I really don't like working too hard. I don't like navigating through this interface. So if we go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, I can actually just go over here to this layer section, and about a third or 2/3 of the way down, you can find the video layer section. So if I want to just create a hotkey for duplicate frame, like, I don't know, say Command D, it already says it's in use, but I don't care. I'll say, that's great. I can now, instead of going up here, through here to duplicate frame, I can now just add that hotkey on my keyboard, and it makes life go by way faster. Command D. You can use Shift, Command D. I mean, there's so many different things you can use. Again, I'm just taking this smudge tool and pushing pixels. This is kind of like finger painting in kindergarten. So, I've basically gotten rid of my Illuminati eye. But if I wanted to, if I wanted to kind of, take this sort of smoke component, I could do the same thing as I did with the background. If I want to kind of transfix it here, I could set position, keyframe, and you can kind of move it, wherever you want, and it'll kind of follow.
Why not duplicate the eye and then create another eye next to it?
Oh boy, you could.
And then just use that as well.
I mean, you could do all kinds of cool things. I mean, if you wanted to come up here and duplicate this layer, now I've got two eyes. We could offset them. I mean, there's so many different things you can do. If you'll notice, like, opacity here can be keyed. Right here it's at 100. Right here, if I reduce this, you'll notice that it'll go down to fading in and fading out. Get rid of our position keys here. So, we can do all kinds of really cool things with this. So that is all I wanted to cover today. Rotoscoping, tracing over live action footage for getting some kind of interesting movement, and also using the smudge tool in Photoshop. Let's turn that off because it's kind of confusing things a little bit. Using the smudge tool to create a more interesting. I'm just going to get rid of this here. There we are. Using the smudge tool to duplicate drawn frames and push pixels around in really interesting ways. Finally, to kind of export this, we'll click on our arrow here. We'll call this roto smudge or something to that effect. Send it to a specific location, hopefully on flash drive some way, H.264 high quality, and render that out. So again, very useful technique, very hot right now in a variety of contexts, and something kind of fun to mess with. I want to do just a couple of different things though, as we bring this into After Effects. We're gonna turn everything off except for our roto. Actually, I just kind of want to show this very briefly. We've got our character here. I'm actually going to render this character off as just we'll call this our jumper. And I'm going to use QuickTime high quality animation with something called a straight unmatted alpha channel. You may or may not recall last time we talked about how this will give us transparency. And if I render this off, it'll just give me this character here. I can come into After Effects, import my file here, grab our jumper, and bring this over the top here. It creates a fresh new composition. We got our little movie clip happening right here. What if we were to take this into 3 dimensions? We'll go grab ourselves a layer solid and turn on this 3D button on both sides. Let's bring this down, and I'm going to open up our transformation options here, flipping this in our x-axis. So the character is quite literally standing on a plane. We'll kind of bring this down. My jumper could be up here, just like our character in the footage. And we could bring the character down into the ground. So let's bring this guy over a little bit more. Get rid of that keyframe. We'll, of course, give it a nice arc. But with our camera, which we can control with hotkey C, now we've got a character moving through 3-dimensional space. I could add some animation to our camera here to further accentuate the excitement. Let's use this layer here to we'll duplicate it. Hotkey R brings up our rotation. Let's bring this back so we can get some lights and shadows into our world here. Come up here to New Light. Give this kind of a nice, I don't know, maybe an orange light. We can choose what kind. Let's use a spot today. This will give us some really interesting options. We do want it to cast shadows, although I'll show you what it does initially. It won't actually show shadows. back in space and up a little bit.
Oh, this is on the camera there.
Yeah. We'll turn up our intensity. And let's turn on our shadows on our characters. Every layer in After Effects that's been activated as sort of 3D or 2.5D has a material attribute that allows us to either turn shadows on or off. And you'll notice that now we've got shadows.
That's it.
It is so cool. And if we don't like how dark those shadows are, we can come over here into our lighting option and we can play around with our cone angle. We can come in here with our sort of fall off radius. We can reduce our shadow darkness right there, and we can also diffuse our shadow. So it actually looks much more convincing. So roto with 2.5D, folks, that's what we're talking about today. Just thought I'd throw that out there as something that you're going to want to experiment with down the road. We'll add to render queue, click on lossless. Again, choose QuickTime, format, H.264, click OK. OK, set a name and path. Call this jumper 2.5D and hit render. So with very little time and kind of a lot of bang for our buck, we've created a sort of 2D world with roto and smudge, and also a cool use of bringing that roto from Photoshop into our footage. Oops, that is not. Here it is. Here's our jumper 2.5D is what we want. Bringing in some character interacting with lights and shadows. So that is all we will